Hi guys, so in this lecture we're going to talk about the second kind of cell transport. In the last one we discussed passive transport, and in this one we're going to discuss active transport. Remember, active transport is going up the gradient using energy. So here we are. Active transport requires the cell to use energy because you're pumping from low concentration to high, which is against the gradient. All right, so you can see here where you're inside the cell and you have very little, and you can pump to outside the cell against the gradient where there's a higher concentration. All right, there's many instances where we may need to do this. One is to get rid of carbon dioxide. When we do cellular respiration, we produce carbon dioxide that has to be removed from our cells. Even if there's already a lot of carbon dioxide outside of our cell, we must pump that out, and so we will use energy to do that. Another example of an organism using active transport would be like a cactus. When cactuses live in the desert, so when it rains, they need to be able to pump as much water into their tissues as possible. So they will actually push against the gradient at their roots to suck in as much water as they can and bring it in, even if there's already water in the cactus. They have to have that mechanism to survive. In this lecture, we're going to talk about three specific types. So remember, in passive transport, we talked about diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. In active transport, we're going to talk about pumps, and in particular, the sodium-potassium pump, endocytosis, and exocytosis. So if we look at this animation of active transport, you can see the energy is coming to the channel protein right here, or sorry, carrier protein right here. And these molecules are going from high concentration to low, except even when this concentration becomes high, it continues to actively pump them against the gradient from then what is low concentration to what is high concentration inside the cell. So these molecules happen to be glucose, because they're little stop signs almost. So they're pumping the sugar in even against the gradient. So the sodium-potassium pump works the same way, and where this plays a role is in your nervous system. So when we have the sodium-potassium pump, sodium is salt, and potassium is found in like bananas, for example. Inside your cell, you have a certain amount of sodium ions hanging out in there. These will dock by shape into the sodium-potassium pump. Your cell wants to push the sodium out. It uses ATP or energy to do that. So the ATP docks there, gives the energy. You notice it turns into ADP, adenosine diphosphate, after it uses the energy, and actively pushes the sodium out, even if there's a bunch of sodium there. The potassium your cell wants. So the potassium will dock onto the other side, and then your cell will bring that in, okay? So sodium out, think of salt as bad stuff, potassium in. And by doing this, it creates a gradient in these ions that then will open up and allow them to flow through, creating electricity for your nerve impulses. So if you are woken up at night by what's called a Charlie horse, which is a cramp in your leg, when your muscles seize up, and they stay seized up for so long that it's incredibly painful. This is usually a malfunction in your sodium-potassium pump, part of your nervous system. This happens when you're either, one, dehydrated, and so the chemical reactions aren't occurring properly within your tissues, or two, you are lacking in either sodium or potassium, and almost always it's potassium because we get sodium in a lot of our food products. So one of the things you can do if this happens in the middle of the night is go get a cup of water, number one, to help replenish your water if you're dehydrated. These are very common. And go ahead and eat something with potassium in it. So a banana if you have one at home, or even a spoonful of mustard, which may sound gross, but it will get the job done. And by replenishing that potassium, it allows your sodium-potassium pump to start working properly, your nerves start firing appropriately, and your muscle will be able to relax. All right, so here's Drake doing the sodium-potassium pump. So you notice there's your ATP, you're pumping the potassium in and the sodium out. So endocytosis, endo for enter, Cytosis just means cell, cyto. So endocytosis is when your cell membrane basically makes a little bubble using the cell membrane, and anything that's outside of your cell, it's going to take a big gulp of it. So this little bubble here is called a vesicle. Let me see if I can write that. All right. Sounds like vacuole because a vesicle is just a special kind of vacuole. Remember, vacuoles hold water, food, and waste. All right, vesicles do the same thing, though they mostly hold food until it's digested. So these vesicles here, like this guy right here, are going to go into the cell. They're going to enter. So in endocytosis, the vesicle is entering the cell, bringing in some food and water with it. All right, so enter. It uses energy to do this because you got to use energy to create these little vesicles and to move them around. So here is endocytosis in action. The cell membrane just dips in, takes a big gulp of whatever is out there, and turns into that vesicle. There are two kinds of endocytosis. There is pinocytosis, think small like the head of a pin. Pinocytosis takes a big gulp of small stuff that is outside of the cell. Could be nutrients, could be water, whatever is out here, it's going to take a little small gulp of it. All right. Then you got phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is bringing in large stuff, okay? It's going to take like a bacteria or something, it's going to eat it. So one big large thing, and it swallows that whole. Then we got exocytosis, exo for exit. This is when your vesicle here is going to now exit your cell. So again, this is your vesicle. It's so hard to write on this, y'all. That's an I. Cool. All right, here's your vesicle. All right, the vesicle, that is a V. All right, it's going to go back where it was. It's going to rejoin the cell membrane, just open up, and all this waste is just going to flow out into the extracellular fluid. So basically, it's like a cycle. You have endocytosis, digestion, and then exocytosis. All of it requiring energy to make the bubbles and move them around. So here's the process. So here, this is in particular phagocytosis, because this is one large thing that's going to be taken in. So phagocytosis, it dips, you create your vesicle. This vesicle meets up with a lysosome. Remember, lysosomes have enzymes in them to help digest and break things down. In this case, it's going to break down this little green bacteria here. Once it's broken down, you have waste products left over, and those are going to leave the cell by exocytosis. This stuff would be picked up by your blood and then filtered in your kidneys and then removed in your urine. So to review, we have passive transport with diffusion, movement of small molecules from high to low. Osmosis, the movement of water from high to low. Facilitated diffusion, the movement of large molecules from high to low with a protein helper. Then we have active transport, which needs energy to be active. We have the sodium-potassium pump that pumps out sodium and in potassium to make a gradient. Endocytosis that pinches our cell membrane or plasma membrane to bring in large amounts, large gulps of stuff. And then exocytosis, which makes that vesicle refuse with the cell membrane or the plasma membrane to get rid of the waste. All right, guys, we are done. Get your notes filled in and turn them in for some points. Bye!